Well, we still got 10 seconds to go, I suppose. Adam, you're looking handsome.
You as well, Ola, as always.
Let's, I think, give people a couple of more minutes to join. Super happy to welcome you all back to StrandCon. Lots of familiar faces from my yesterday when I was logged on here. I might have billed this as Plini interview and performance, but that was never anything that I discussed with Plini. Instead, he's going to take us through a little bit around like his songwriting process and play some materials from the new album. And we'll have all you guys ask questions. So I think we have an incredibly exciting hour ahead of us. And with that, I think let's do one thing first. Let's all switch to gallery view in Zoom to see who's here. And everybody wave. Hello. This is fully booked and overbooked, so I guess some people are missing or don't have video. But with this, let's go back to speaker view, and I shall put Plini on. Take it away.
What's up? That's so strange, there's no feedback. I'm just going to assume that you're all cheering and
Yeah.
Oh, that was amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I think if I make a joke, I'll probably pause for about 10 seconds to let you finish laughing. I see some smiles, this is great. Anyway, what I thought I would do, because I have an album coming out in about 30 hours, is play one of the songs and then just let you ask me questions about it, and I can go through the song or go through anything you like. I have a guitar here and I can play it with just enough lag to be really annoying. So that should be fun. But unless Ola has anything else to say, I will attempt to route audio through my computer into Zoom.
It's all good, Plini.
And that's it. Thank you for the thunderous applause. I can't say that I was any less energetic then than I usually am when I'm actually performing. So maybe I should do more Zoom performances. But yeah, Ola, if you want to just start letting people ask questions, I think that'll be a lot of fun.
Sure thing. Let's, I'll just start with Joshua. You were the first one. Go for it.
I am speechless. It was too good.
Oh, thank you.
You're literally speechless, or can you think of a question?
My brain hasn't woken up from the nap I took between the last masterclass and now.
All right, Kurt, prepare a question. I will bring you on.
How's it going?
Hey, Kurt.
Hey, I'm glad I actually got a chance to ask you a question. I've been mulling it over since I bought this ticket. So I have two for you, if that's okay.
Sure.
Great. I've watched a few of your interviews where you talked about mostly being self-taught with guitar and kind of like learning a lot of composition things on your own. When you were like going through that process, what was one of the more technical aspects you had trouble overcoming, and what approach did you take to actually like dealing with it?
Probably playing the guitar itself. It's kind of hard to think about this in retrospect because everything just seems so easy now. No, not really. I think one thing that definitely helps is appreciating that it's something that's going to take a long time, whether you're doing it yourself or doing it with an instructor. And so most of what I do is writing music. And the way I taught myself that was by listening to a lot of music, which I've been doing pretty much my whole life. And so maybe every year I pick up 3 or 4 new things that help me with songwriting or composition. But I'd say the biggest obstacle was trying to get better at guitar. But we live in such a great time where you can get tabs, and most guitarists have instructional stuff on YouTube. And it takes a really long time. It's annoying, and that's why I suck at alternate picking and suck at sweep picking and suck at pretty much everything other than what you hear me do on the like half an hour of music I make every 2 or 3 years. Because it is really time consuming. But at the same time, we're all gonna hopefully live a long time. So if you kind of listen to music and figure out what you really like and then focus on those small things, I think that's a kind of helpful way to be able to start playing the way that you want to play or making the music that you want to hear. Hopefully that helps.
No, that's a really good answer. And I had one more, if that's all right.
Sure.
So in a lot of the music that you write, at least from like just a single fan perspective, you do one thing a lot differently, I find, compared to a lot of other guitar-driven bands or guitar-driven artists, where you're not always making sure that your guitar is front and center in terms of being the main focal point of your piece. So how do you normally go about approaching something at the beginning in terms of composition when you're actually starting it from a guitar playing perspective? Like, your songs tend to be very big and broad and atmospheric. How are you getting all that from mostly being the driving force behind the center instrument of the guitar?
I'm going to see if I can go back into that Logic session and show you some stuff. But I guess the short answer is I write everything except the lead guitar first, and then if there happens to be space for a solo, then I'll take it or get someone else to take it. And if there happens to be, usually when there's a melody, I'll play it at least on one guitar and then maybe on some other instruments. So I'm just gonna try and do this again. So this middle section here, was written pretty much as that bass line and drums at first, and then the guitar doubles the bass line, which I don't really count as guitar playing, it's just a texture. So I kind of have all that with no real guitar playing in it. And then it comes time to write a melody. And a lot of the time I pick sort of the simplest thing that I can think of. So like, and so I'll add all that sort of stuff in there. Because every time I'm making a new album or a new song, I'm usually playing with different synth sounds that I haven't played with before, because that's a lot of the stuff that inspires me to write new songs. So I'll get all that shit into the session. And then by the time all the stuff that sounds exciting to me is in there, the only space that's left might be like this, which is like a 2-3 note melody. So I think it's partly a coincidence that a lot of my inspiration doesn't come from lead guitar playing. So I happen to be writing stuff on drums, bass, synths first. But I think if you do write on the guitar first, it's the same sort of thing. Like once you get up to the point of writing a melody, maybe the focus of the melody is on a different instrument, or the focus of the riff is on a different instrument. And I think that's the way, at least for me, to write guitar music that hopefully sounds a bit different to other guitar music you come across, because it's the stuff that's going on spread across different instruments and different sounds. Hopefully that answered the question.
That's the most comprehensive answer I think I would have ever gotten to that question. So thanks. And thanks a lot. I seriously appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks, man.
Fabulous. Let's bring Alan on.
Hey, Plini, how you doing?
Good. How are you, Alan?
Good. I am great. It's midnight 15 here in Kansas City, so a little early in the morning. But I know you've talked about kind of how you create melodies as thinking of them as lullabies, and then kind of converting that into like a progressive texture with the underlying time signatures and layering and all that kind of stuff. So how do you go about taking a lullaby, like a very melodic start, and then putting that into like a 15/16 time signature without making it feel like disjointed, like still retaining the natural rhythm to it? And how do you kind of like fuse those things together in a way that still sounds very natural, even though you're using a very strange time signature?
One thing that I'll quickly recommend, and I don't quite remember what it's called, but if you guys know of Adam Neely, who's a YouTuber, like super clever theory guy, he was part of a project called, this is the part I don't remember what it was called, but it's lullabies for children that have all been reharmonized and reworked into odd time signatures. So if you look up Adam Neely lullaby children on YouTube, you should come across it. And I think that's a great example because you'll probably know all the lullabies they used, but they've sort of fucked them up in different ways with darker harmony or weirder time signatures. And I think that's a really great example of how something really simple can be used in any context. And I suppose it's a similar thing for me. I almost always write the melody last. So it's like, no matter what I've ended up with, I'm trying to find a way to put this like lullaby-like melody on top. And often, I guess I'll use this song as an example again. The main melody that happens throughout pretty much the whole song starts out in quite a simple context. And then I basically just recycle it over one of the heavier parts of the song because it still works harmonically. And then sometimes the rhythm gets shifted a bit, but I'll just try to share my screen again. So this is the melody that I'm talking about. Which happens again later in the song, and I'm guessing by looking at a waveform, so I might be wrong. So that's still pretty much exactly the same melody. And I think that's probably a little bit too haunting to be something you would want to play your children unless you want to raise a monster. But so that melody here, the context of that is so I wrote this, well, I took this in the sugar riff and just put the same sort of lullaby thing over the top. At this point, I've totally forgotten what your question was. But I think the answer is to experiment with stuff that already exists in the song, or maybe strip back a complex part that's in 15/16 or whatever into a lullaby version, maybe like a strummed acoustic, and then write a melody on top of that, and then transport a lullaby on top of the like sort of prog mess that you make. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
Ryan, you're up.
Hello. So I'm sort of gearing up to release an EP, sort of first time releasing it, like with putting effort into it and hiring people. And I was just wondering what strategies you found as far as like marketing. What have you found to be the most helpful? And for this album that you're releasing, have you employed any kind of new strategies or found anything that works better than anything else?
I'm terrible at all of this, which might sound surprising, but I'm terrible at least as far as there's about 50 to 60% more marketing that I know exactly what to do and just don't, because that's who I am as a person. But I found the stuff that works the best is just the music being captivating. Like I think the thing you have to do before you even think about marketing of any kind is make sure the music is like the very best thing that you can do, like in this moment, because obviously you're going to get better with every release. And I don't think it makes sense to hold on to something for years until you feel good enough. But to really make sure the music's something you're really proud of, and then just making a few videos, I think, is really helpful. There's a guitarist called Joshua Della Victoria. You guys might have seen on Instagram, and I'm probably looking at Instagram the average amount of time for someone my age. And so I discovered his playing because he's consistently posts really awesome videos of really interesting stuff, like weird time signatures or working on hybrid picking. And so that's how I became a fan of him, because he has really cool ideas and he shares them in a kind of simple and nice to watch sort of way. So I think if you take your music and turn it into, if you can, like a bunch of minute-long clips that just look good and sound good, and share them to the usual places on the internet, that's a great place to start. And then I think that's probably most of the battle. Have you released music before?
Yeah, in sort of a let's see if I can see a project through to the end kind of way. Sort of in a feverish month and a half, just sort of beginning to end kind of thing. But this time around, I've sort of taken a year or two, and I've talked to Jake Hausen Low, sort of as a help me workshop this kind of stuff, and
Yeah.
Getting Adam Bentley to mix, and sort of trying to make a team, as it were.
I think you almost answered the question better than I did before. And I'd say you've done the perfect thing, which is involve people who are already sort of implanted in, I'm just assuming that this is a guitar related album, and I'm probably correct. So you're already working with the perfect people. Like Adam Bentley is no doubt going to be proud of his mix and share it with his following, including Adam Rafowitz, who'll then hear it and be like, damn, this is sick, and then share it on his stuff, and then I'll see it and be like, oh, it's the guy from the Zoom thing, and then it's kind of just, it'll spiral like that. And then maybe, hopefully you play a Strandberg, and then Ola will share it, and stuff like that, and then Jake will share it with people he knows. And that's, I mean, this is a terrible analogy, but then it'll just spread, just like a certain thing that we won't talk about has spread all year. Yeah, hopefully that helps.
Thanks, Plini.
All right, awesome. Let's bring Cyan on for a question. You're on mute, Cyan.
First off, the song sounds amazing. And second, all the new songs just sound really alive. And was wondering if the thing that should not be named wound up having any effect on the headspace and creativity around the project. And also, was there anything new that you learned about yourself and your approach to writing compared to your last few releases?
The one new thing that I learned about myself is all the stuff that I used to hate doing. There's actually a lot of time in the day to do, like general cleanliness and like maintenance and chores and that sort of thing. I started actually enjoying doing things like washing dishes, because when there's no rush to go anywhere, you may as well find a way to enjoy like every minute of every day as best you can. In terms of the impact on the record, I guess it almost doubled the amount of time that I had set aside for it. So originally I wanted to have everything recorded by around May, to tour Europe in summer. And then I found out that that wouldn't be happening pretty early on into the process, and ended up taking till basically August or September to finish on my parts. I had a lot more time to like reflect on all the different things and try out different production techniques and different sounds. And almost in the same way that now I don't mind spending 10 minutes to wash a frying pan, I will spend an extra 10 minutes tweaking a synth sound to take it maybe further away from being something that I've used before.
Yep.
And the downside is I think next album I'm going to spend like 3 years making, but we'll see.
Nice. Thanks a lot for answering.
Thanks.
Fantastic. Let's bring Christian on.
Hi, Plini. Hi, everyone. First off, big fan. The song was really good. My question for you is, what do you think is something that guitarists focus too much, that you think it's not necessary, or that you don't think it's, or you think it's like superficial, like you wouldn't waste too much time on it?
I'm going to answer your question with sort of the opposite. I think the thing that guitarists don't focus on enough is vibrato. So I guess you could pick like any sort of vanity technique, and I'm probably just saying this because I'm bad at them, but like alternate picking, sweep picking, all the sort of shreddy stuff. I think people are better and better at that stuff than any time in history before. But I think there's still too much like nervous guitar style vibrato. And so I think everyone should spend like 5 minutes a day, every day of their life, working on slowing down the vibrato and making it more musical. And then I guess the thing that it's up to you to pick what you spend too much time on and take that 5 minutes and put it on vibrato.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Cool. Vince, you're on. Oh, you're still on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Hi, Vinnie. How are you? Hi, everyone. Good morning from UK. It's pretty early here, 6 o'clock in the morning. I've got one question. You mentioned just now that, whenever you start writing, you start off with pieces of different musical ideas, right? And most likely you'll probably start with any other instrument than guitar. Do you mind me asking you, do you normally have all these like musical ideas in your head and you try to actually play on the instrument, or you basically just experiment them on the actual instrument to start with?
Good morning, firstly. Just to clarify, I usually do write the ideas on guitar. It's just that when I start recording them, I'll put them on other instruments as well. So it might end up off the guitar. Sorry, what was the question again?
The question is that, do you normally have the whole musical idea, the pieces of musical idea in your head to start with, and then you play on the instrument, or you actually experiment them on the instrument as you go?
Yeah, I definitely experiment as I go. It's kind of like if you have a really weak computer and you try and play a detailed video game, so it's only ever loading like a meter in front of you at a time. So that's sort of how I feel about making the music. I need to record 8 seconds and then I can hear the next 8 seconds.
I see.
There have been some rare times where I sort of get an idea for a whole song in my head, but even then it won't have the detail. I need to start working on the details by actually playing them. And something that I tricked myself into when I was making this album is I had 10 demos, which I thought I'd narrow down into 8 songs. And then when I went to actually sort of edit them down and start recording properly, I realized that these demos were really only about 20 seconds of music and just 4 minutes of copy paste that wasn't usable or was like a failed experiment. So yeah, definitely helps me to hear the music as music and like get it out of my head as quickly as possible.
Cool. Thank you. Thank you for the answer.
All right, Ollie, you're on.
Okay then. Hi, first of all. My question is, I guess, what's your approach to songwriting? Like, what do you do first? What do you do last? I think everyone has a different approach to it, and it is interesting to me and probably other people too.
Yeah, the first thing is the mysterious part, and that's becoming inspired and having a musical idea of some kind. And I have no idea how to do that part. That's always a mystery. But usually it is something on the guitar that sounds intriguing in some way. So it could be a chord or a melody or a riff or a rhythm or something like that. The next thing I'll do is record it and add drums and bass almost immediately. I don't think I haven't written a song yet that didn't have drums and bass. So I feel like if it's going to become music, there's going to be drums and bass. So the sooner that I can hear what the guitar part or the first idea is doing in the context of a band, the easier it'll be to start developing. So let's say that becomes 8 or 16 bars of a riff, then the question is what's going to happen next. And in terms of what's going to happen next, depending on that riff, it's either going to be something very similar, very different, or somewhere in between. And I think growing up and listening to so much like progressive music, there's something extremely different that's usually like the go-to what happens next. But then because I'm trying to make instrumental songs that seem meaningful, I think there should be at least some level of repetition between sections, or at least within the song as a whole. So if my second section is going to be extremely different, I would still want something about it to be the same. So that could be a little melody over the top, or the same rhythm, or the same chords, but suddenly it's with distorted guitars and more layers or something like that. And then once 2 sections exist, I think that's when it becomes a little bit easier, because then what you do from there is almost optional. I think maybe a 3rd section you might want to add, and then that can be almost totally unrelated. I heard this great analogy yesterday, which I've already forgotten, about bridges, and I wish I could remember, but it again is in an Adam Neely video. So if you watch his last video talking about lessons that Thelonious Monk gave his young sax player, one of the quotes is about bridges, and that's what I would be saying now if I could remember it. And then usually to finish it, there'll be some sort of repetition of something that happened that was supposed to be memorable towards the beginning of the song. So it's kind of like initial idea turns into something that sounds like music, then it goes somewhere else, and then it does whatever you want, and then it returns to the thing that you think is the most important. And yeah, I guess that's my songwriting process in a nutshell.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. Well, Eddie, you're on. Ask a question.
Hi, Plini. How you doing?
Hey.
I have a quick question for you. So something I really admire from you is how calm you always are or look, even including like, I can't imagine like doing like the Steve I Academy. Is there something, what's your approach when it comes to that? Like where you're able to maintain kind of a level of staying calm and relax?
I'm not sure. I'm drinking coffee in an attempt to seem more exciting. We'll see how that works. I've always been pretty calm, and I went to university and studied architecture, which I think like any degree at university is something that can become stressful and involve not sleeping much and having teachers who might be angry with you because you didn't do enough work and all that sort of stuff. So I think even though it didn't necessarily help with music, it definitely helped in terms of how I deal with stress, especially sort of external stress. I don't like to call myself lazy, but I definitely like to do the bare minimum for a lot of things. And I remember one day I came with what was meant to be a model of a building, but was basically like a floor and a wall. And I tried to talk myself out of it, and it didn't work at all. But I think like accepting that it was my fault that it sucked, and then not taking the level of criticism on personally is just something that I'm getting better and better at. And so most of the time now, if I fail at something or I'm uncomfortable in a situation, I usually will know in advance it's because I didn't prepare enough. So with playing live and making mistakes, sometimes that happens because I just didn't practice enough leading into the tour. And so I've learned that the more tours I've done, The earlier I start practicing, even though it's not that fun, it's going to be way more fun once I actually get on stage. If I know all the songs like front to back, don't have to look at the guitar, don't have to think about it. There's far less reasons for me to stress. And then stuff like the Steve Vai Academy, I like because I was so uncomfortable, especially when I jammed with him. Actually, more so when I did a masterclass with him, because I didn't have a guitar to hide behind. I was sitting on a chair next to someone who's being charismatic and talking about music for probably 50 years longer than I have even tried, and then trying to like push it out of my mind that this is my childhood hero and like have just a conversation. But that's the sort of experience that I want to have, because I know next time it'll be a little bit more comfortable and a little bit more comfortable. But I think in general, the more you can like maximize how prepared you are for any situation, the less reasons you'll have not to just be sort of calm and enjoy whatever it is.
Cool. Thank you, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Great. Let's bring John on. Do you have a question?
Hello. I've joined a little bit later than the others, and I don't know how much questions have been answered so far. My question would be your approach to chords. I've seen you using 2-note or 3-note structures, but those are a little bit other than the typical approach to chords that you learn at music school or whatever. It's like only 2 notes. So that would be interesting.
Hey, yeah, with chords, something that I've started doing more and more is I'll write a chord progression, which will usually be quite simple. So using like the sort of bar chords that everyone learns when they first start playing guitar, and I'll record them. I guess I should mention that whenever I'm writing music, I'm pretty much always set up to record. I don't know how to do it any other way. So I'll record the simple version of the chords, and then on a guitar or on a keyboard, I'll start adding different notes on top to see, like, just trial and error to see what I can do to extend the harmony into something a little bit less obvious. And then depending what happens with that, I might take out most or the entire original chord. So that's sort of how I end up with a chord that's 2 notes, but is sort of holding the place of a more complex chord. And I'm sure there's a simpler way or a more sort of condensed way of explaining this that you could learn through theory, but I just haven't come across it because I haven't read the right book. But it is totally just a trial and error of building on top of an existing simple chord and then taking away the stuff that I don't think needs to be there. And then after doing this a few times, some of those chords become like the first chord that I start with. So then I guess then that process starts again. So maybe in 10 years, I'll end up back on the simple chords by going like, hopefully that helps.
Yeah, this is great. Thank you.
Sami, you're on.
Hello, Vinnie. It's late night for you and morning here in Finland. On these Strandberg pickups, you have been in a process, and some of those launched yesterday, and which one you have tested, and what has been your feelings about those?
A quick question for Ola. Am I allowed to talk about everything or only the latest pickup?
You're allowed to talk about everything, I think. We have
so the first Strandberg I got, which is there somewhere, was a US-made Bowden, which had Misha Mansour's signature, what are they called, bare knuckle juggernauts. And I picked them because I love the sound of his guitar. And I think he might have actually got a Strandberg that was made at the same time with those pickups as well.
Yep.
And so that's the sort of sound that I first started building my tones with. And then when we did the first signature model, I had a Seymour Duncan JB and jazz set, which did feel like an upgrade in some ways, because I think it had some sort of warm characteristics, especially with clean tones that the bare knuckles didn't. And then Strandberg started using Sir pickups, and I tried a bunch of different ones and realized that those felt like an upgrade from the Seymour Duncans, with sort of more clarity in mid-range, especially with sort of medium gain tones and trying to play chords with 6 notes in them. I felt they were ringing out a lot nicer. And then Ed, who works for Strandberg, started telling me about the Michael Frank design pickups, and he was very smug about how what I felt going from Seymour Duncan to Sir was going to be like 10 times the effect going from Sir to these pickups. And I can't remember whether I tried them in person or you guys sent me a set to put in a guitar, but he was right. They sort of, the thing with the chords sounded better than ever. Everything was more clear. They had a much more even low end, and everything about them was just kind of better. And so that's what I have in most of my guitars now. And then we've also been working on a signature set, which is pretty similar to the, I think it's called the classic model, but the bridge pickup is voiced a little bit differently, and you also get a different split coil sound in them. But basically they're the best pickups I've ever played. And actually it was interesting, I have at the moment 2 neck through guitars. One of them has my signature prototype and one has the classic model. And I was recording a guest solo for someone with settings that I dialed in for my my prototype signature set, and then used the other guitar, and something about the mid-range on the lead was a little bit wrong. I mean, it was easy to fix, but that was kind of a helpful moment, at least for me, educating myself in why I would have made these changes. But yeah, it's been interesting because I'm not so focused on gear, but it seems like every decision Strandberg makes for their guitars is what I want. So I don't know if that's just because we like the same sounds, but it's definitely been good for me, if nothing else.
Good. Sounds good.
Awesome. James, you're on.
Hey, Ola. Hey, Plini. So I was just curious. I've been to several of your shows, and it seems like it's while sometimes you've got a lot of the traditional rock dudes in there, you've got a pretty diverse crowd that shows up at your shows. And I was wondering if you're ever surprised by how diverse the audience is for your music.
Hey, James. I can't say that I have been too surprised. I think also because I go to a lot of shows of like similar bands, at least in Sydney. So I'm used to the point where I know a lot of people just because we're the people that always go to the shows. But I guess it is an interesting mix in terms of some people are coming to it coming from like the metal community, some are coming from the guitar community, some are coming from like the, I don't even know what you'd call it, like everyday life, like the girlfriends or boyfriends of people who like the music. And I've noticed that's happening more and more. I'm not sure what it is, but it seems like people are getting more comfortable bringing their friends who had never heard the music to the show before. So that's been really interesting.
And then also, I was curious how you kind of feel like you go from this kind of heavy background in music, where some of your favorite bands are Meshuggah and things like that, how that goes from being kind of the core of where you start with a song to kind of these beautiful lyrical songs that kind of take on their own life and kind of span a lot of genres.
I guess because I've listened to so much different music, I've started thinking of it all almost in the same way. Like I'll get on a plane and go to sleep listening to Meshuggah the same as I would listening to like a solo piano album or something like that. So when it comes to writing, I don't necessarily hear such a big difference between a certain chord or chord progression played as a Meshuggah riff or played as a piano or played as like a fusion riff. To me, it's all, the similarities can be quite like enough to blend them together in a way that doesn't feel too disjointed. And I think another thing is that when I first started writing music, and probably still am, trying to copy Dream Theater and Steve Vai and those guys who were already writing really diverse music. At least when they first were releasing music, there was probably nothing that sounded like it. And so I'm sort of just adding a couple of extra things to something that's already diverse, which feels sort of natural to me, but maybe for someone that's coming straight from like the Meshuggah side or straight from the like traditional jazz side will be like, how the fuck did you blend these things together? Yeah, but I guess from just stealing from as many places as possible.
Right on, thanks.
All right, very cool. I've been going through the list of like people who register specifically for this session, and I think I was able to get through all of you, and you would have had to be on video to be picked. We have almost 10 minutes left, so the floor is open. Wave, and I will spotlight you. Andre, I think you're registered. Let's bring you on.
Hello, guys. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, perfect. I've been playing a lot of your music to my kids because it feels like they have a lot of content. They have a lot of changes. And what I'm wondering is probably, how do you give up on a riff? How do you not want to play the same riff over and over for like 2 minutes?
Good question. I guess it's easier to only do it once, and I'm all about efficiency. Something, I don't know if you guys know Jakub Żetecki. He's a Polish guitarist. He's one of my best friends and biggest inspirations. I sent him some music from the album when I started working on it last year, and one of his comments on one of the songs was, I feel like you didn't need to repeat this part so many times. Like it doesn't, hello. It doesn't feel like the listener has deserved that extra repetition. So I think there's a couple of ways to go about it. If you have something like a riff or whatever that feels really special, maybe it's going to have a bigger impact if it only happens once instead of happening like 3 or 4 times. And then another way, I guess, is what Opeth do in a couple of their songs, which is have a really simple but insanely sick riff that they'll finish the song with and then do it for like 5 minutes straight. So I think those two can often be how they have a better impact with that special riff than if it just happens one too many times. And I think that's probably why a lot of us aren't as captivated by a lot of pop music, because the chorus is usually used 3 or 4 times without any change. So yeah.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Yeah, an anecdote there. I was putting together a small like promo video for this event, and I'd copied and pasted one section out of your songs as the background music. Can you please not loop that? All
Yeah,
right.
that's right.
Someone else that wants to ask a question, wave or just unmute and shout. There we go. Andy, go for it.
Hey man, you've played quite a lot of like chromatic stuff and the same note on adjacent strings, or at least there's quite a lot of that, I think. How do you get there?
It's just right next to it, isn't it? Could you clarify your question a little bit? And also, hello, nice to see you again.
Yeah, you good? Okay, so you take some time to develop like licks and stuff and work out how a different scale sounds against a different chord. But using the note on the same adjacent string, you can use it quite percussively, sort of as like a little tricky phrase. I guess it's probably too vague a question, but how might you design a method of working out your own patterns using either chromaticism or same notes on adjacent strings?
So the way I do that stuff is a lot of trial and error, especially with the stuff that ends up on a recording. I spend almost as much time working on solos as I do the whole song, just in order to not repeat myself in terms of those patterns too much. And I suppose the adjacent, like the same note on adjacent strings thing is kind of like my flavor of the year or maybe last 2 years. And that comes from noodling around a scale, but usually in a way that's a little bit more stretched. So if you have a pentatonic scale and you play 3 notes per string instead of 2, you end up with that same note adjacent on pretty much every pair of strings. And then it's really just like a wiggling process of if you go down a bit, then maybe you come back up a bit and then go down further and come back up, to avoid going just top to bottom and bottom to top the whole time. But really it's just a lot of trial and error and maybe recording bits and pieces and cutting them all together and then relearning what it was. So some of it can be quite awkward at first, but then that's how it ends up being a like sort of less obvious pattern, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Cheers.
Thanks.
All right. Someone raised their hand a second ago, but it's gone. So I'm going to put Sami on.
Again, on your sounds, what we listen on the guitar side, is it a lot of with neural DSP, or are you using also a lot of other stuff?
So for the album and for the song that I played before, all the lead guitar and all the cleans are my Neural DSP plugin, and the rhythms, I think Simon, who mixed it, used a 5150 for most of it and a Marshall something or other for the rest. But the majority of it is my plugin, and that was something that was really easy in the process because I record demos and send them to him to mix with the preset of the guitar that I used. So the last EP we did together, there was a bit of back and forth because I'd recorded it a certain way and then he was reamping it using a totally different set of gear. So some of the more delicate stuff wasn't coming out how I wanted it in terms of like compression and gates and that sort of thing. But with this, he sort of started out with the exact sound that I was using and then just tweaked it a little bit, like with the EQ to sit in the mix. So that made it a lot better. But yeah, it's mostly just the Neural DSP plugin.
Have you tested already Quad Cortex pedal
I tried it at NAMM earlier this year in January, and at that point they hadn't finished putting all the different amp models and effects into it. But what I did try was sort of predictably amazing. It's kind of funny. I feel like they're very similar to Strandberg in that, like, everyone else started throughout history making products that were like this good and slowly getting better, and then it was just like, hey, what's up, guys? We're starting here, and then we'll see you later. So yeah, I think once it's out and available, we'll probably all end up using it because it's just really good.
Good.
All right, cool. We're gonna wrap up there. I have you on gallery view. Everyone wave a bit. Thank you guys so much for participating. Thank you, Plini, for sharing all this goodness. I'm going to just go to a background screen. We can all go to a bathroom break and then move on to the next agenda point, which is the artist extravaganza. But thanks everyone, signing off for a few minutes.
Thank you all for coming.